Hey, welcome to Bifocal. Today we're going to be talking about sales, marketing, CRM, and most importantly, we're going to talk about common struggles companies run into as it relates to that. Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back. Today is part of our business series, and we're going to be talking about common struggles that companies go through as it relates to sales and lead generation and lead management, CRM. And we have a guest today that has a lot of exposure to that. We have Lauren Zach from Concept. She's Director of Account Development. So Lauren, welcome to Bifocal.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, I thought it might be a little difficult getting you in the studio. You're not around a lot.
Yes, I'm on the road quite a bit.
Yeah, you travel a lot.
Mm-hmm. Almost every week.
Every week?
Yes. Just a few nights, though. So
You gathering up some frequent flyer miles?
Yes, my status on Americans climbing.
Do they call you by first name?
I wish.
Yeah.
I wish. I'm lucky if I get an upgrade, but it's all adding up now.
So every week you're traveling?
Pretty much.
Yep.
I'm going to see some of our partners. I head to trade shows, conferences, industry groups. So really just trying to learn more and bring that back to Concept, and also to find opportunity for us to grow our partnerships and do business with other partners.
I thought it would be interesting to have you on. And I've been at this a long time, sales and lead generation. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of things that just never change. How they generate leads and things like that changes.
Sure.
But a lot of the common struggles and stuff, a lot of that just doesn't change. And I'm kind of interested to kind of hear your take on what are things you run into, common struggles, and as it relates to lead gen and lead management and sales structures and CRM. And, I know what I ran into, and I'm kind of anxious to kind of hear, because you're out in front of a lot of companies.
Yeah.
And, and I thought maybe to kick this off, maybe bring us up to speed with what you've been doing at Concept and your role, and because you've had a couple different roles over the last couple of years. You've been here a while. Mm-hmm. So bring us up to speed.
Sure. So my current role is the Director of Account Development. I oversee our customer-facing team of account executives. And I'm also assigned key accounts and networks. And so those can be partners of ours where we have existing business, or key targets that I'm going after from a sales perspective.
So you have some sales responsibility now.
I do, yeah. And that's new to me and my role at Concept. So really since about the start of the year, is when I moved into a little bit more of a sales function. But it makes sense because I'm also the main liaison for industry groups that we work with. So, as I'm out networking and learning more, it's a good opportunity for us to, connect there, and then take those relationships into more of a sales conversation.
How long have you been with Concept?
About 5.5 years. Time has flown. I can't believe it.
What did you started doing? What?
I started on the phone. So I was a business development manager when I first came in. I made 80 to 100 phone calls a day, just like our folks out on the floor today. And I was passed up on, I think, about 4 times for promotion to account manager, but I kept at it. And after about 11 months with the company, I moved into a account management role. And I did that for, I think, about 1.5 years, and I managed some of our largest partners.
You get a lot of exposure to a lot of accounts.
I did.
In the account manager role.
I did, yeah. I had a pretty diverse book of business, and really ranged from material handling to construction to professional services, supply chain, and transportation. Yeah. So I was, really fortunate to have exposure to those areas.
And just kind of set the stage for that. Mm-hmm. Your primary role as an account manager was what?
My primary role was being the main liaison between Concept and our customers, but really driving strategy and then ensuring that our team internally was executing that strategy.
For what?
So at the time, we were solely a prospecting firm and doing lead qualification, lead follow-up, and cold prospecting, nurturing type of conversations. Since then we've added on other services, but at the time I was just really focused on, okay, what are the pieces of market intelligence we're trying to gather from prospects in the markets of our customers. What industries should we focus on? And then, more importantly, what is a sales qualified lead? Because if we're handing off leads to customers or salespeople that are too early on in the funnel or too early on in terms of development, we lose sight of them. And so that was a huge focus. Is that
how many accounts
ROI
would
tracking.
you manage at one time?
I think, the book is very vast. So it could be one customer with one project on it, or it could be one customer with 10 projects on it. So I think I managed probably about 15 to 20 customers when I was in the account manager role.
All different sizes?
Yes, absolutely.
So you had large companies, small companies.
Large companies, small companies. Large companies where, we were a line item similar to other, services that they had or other vendors that they utilized. And then small companies where we were it in terms of their inside sales or their prospecting. So, really got to learn about really their level of investment is not necessarily driven by how much money they are spending with Concept. It's driven by how much they really require our services.
How active were you in that account manager role to really setting strategy? How much of the strategy was driven to you, and how much of the strategy were you actively involved in pushing back to the customer? Well,
I'd say most of our customers are looking for us to be that strategic force. And so, there are some customers that, of course, were, might have had a pretty robust marketing or sales team that had an idea of what we wanted to support and execute for them. But the majority of our partners are looking to us as an industry expert. They're looking to us as someone that, our bread and butter is lead generation, lead qualification. And so they would always err, once we signed on with them, once they felt that we were credible, that they would say, hey, this is your business. You know better than I do. That's why we contracted you. And so, they'd really give up the reins and allow for us to make
So you did the account manager role for how long, you said?
About a year and a half.
And then after that, where'd you go?
After that, I moved into a business unit director role, and that no longer exists at Concept. But at the time, we had 3 campuses, and I oversaw our central operations group. So really, anyone that reported inside of that campus reported to me, and there were various layers of management underneath me. So at that time, I started.
That was kind of an operations role as well.
It was, yeah. It was actually, I think anybody that's been in a sales account-facing role or an operations role and maybe has done both at the same time knows that a lot of your time and focus becomes on operations, just due to the number of people and just the constant grind Volume. Of any operations group. And performance is key, and you can improve performance, but if you let go of it or lose sight of it, you can quickly see a drop in your performance, and then ultimately, your customer base. So I was a business unit director, I think, for a little over a year with that campus. And then as we consolidated our buildings, we were still growing, but when we moved into this new building here about a year and a half ago, I took over as the business unit director for the entire operation. So I had, all of the account executives, customer-facing folks reporting to me, all of the production and performance, both on the calling side and on the managerial side, reporting to me as well. So it was a really large role.
You got exposed to lead generation from all aspects.
Absolutely.
And now you're in a little bit of a different role, you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so now I'm really more so customer facing, and operations internally is handled by another director here at Concept. And really that was a suggestion that I made once I moved into the role and saw that we just needed more from either side of the business. We had a lot of people on the phones that started off maybe doing one function, which grew as our customers grew, which grew as we became more involved with their business, and then also as we added service offerings. So the production side of things is overseen by someone else.
That's a full-time job all by itself.
That's absolutely a full-time job all by itself. And so now my role is really more customer-facing, working with those key accounts to ensure that we're making them happy, we're seeing the return on investment, and that we can grow their investment with Concept.
So you mentioned your customer interfacing now. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's solely what you did. I mean, you did a lot of that in the past, but that's solely what you do now.
Yes.
And you're out in front of customers a lot?
I am.
A lot is what?
A lot. I think last year I went on maybe 45 trips. And the year before, I think was over 50.
So every week you're out.
Just about every week I'm out. And a lot of times I see multiple customers,
You're gone for a week.
If I can try to layer them and get the biggest bang for my trip, then I do that. But and when I visit customers, it's a pretty good mix of presenting on concept, what we've done for them as a partner, what we want to do in the future. I hold rep workshops where I'm going through and helping them to promote process adoption, and then I also, go
trying
into
to get them to adopt some of the processes that
a little bit of both, yeah. Concept has, processes that we have put in place to ensure that our customers see a return on investment for our lead generation services or our marketing services. And most companies that we work with struggle to connect those dots, and I'm sure we'll talk about that today. But, inherently, when I'm talking about concept-only leads from other sources and their own internal prospecting, their own internal pipeline development, it should fall in line with those same processes because it's all about simplicity. So I end up really talking about more of their business holistically.
And today you're out talking to customers, but you're also out talking to prospects.
I am, yeah.
You're out hearing, seeing what their issues are. Mm-hmm. What do you hear? Like when you're out talking to prospects, what are they interested in?
Yeah. So I think, the climate used to be all about lead generation. I don't have enough leads. I don't have the right leads. And that's still very much alive. But the focus of most organizations now is I have the leads. I actually might have too many of them. I don't understand the quality of those leads. They're not translating to my team. I can't track and, provide ROI to, ownership or the president.
And those leads are coming from where?
Leads can come from, marketing. So anything from a web perspective, through your website, through social media, through email marketing, whether you're doing blasts or you're doing more of a, strategic marketing plan with marketing automation. But leads can also come from being partnered with a data source. They can be from being partnered with a lead generation company, whether that's digitally or calling. And there's a million different lead sources out there. We have a good handle of the ones that are most effective for our partners in the industries that we play heavily in.
It probably varies by industry, right?
Yeah, it varies by industry. It might vary by territory. And it also varies by the type of contact that we're going after. So having the company name and having, the understanding that this is a company organization that you want to target is one thing. It's one type of lead. And then there's the lead of having the right contact. And when you start to get into C-level and, C-suite, VP, the lead generation really changes. People aren't going online and submitting their name very often to be a part of an email blast or to get more information on a form on a website. That typically is coming through with, director or managerial positions that are a little bit more intermediate.
Why do you think, you mentioned maybe one of the top struggles is they have leads, but they don't know where they're coming, or maybe they don't know what the quality is, and they're not, measuring them, and maybe not. But why is that a problem? Why do you think that's a problem?
It's the age-old issue of salespeople not having enough time during the day or not being able to prioritize their day-to-day activities and responsibilities. So most companies that are struggling with lead qualification, proving ROI to their lead sources, they have leads being generated, they have no qualification of those leads, and then they're being passed over to their salespeople. And then typically what we see is that, okay, they've been passed to the salesperson, and based on the salesperson's time, based on their training, based on their read
guys
of
are
the
supposed
lead.
to do.
I know.
Why isn't it working?
Well, it's working. It's not working because most people aren't being held accountable to actually qualifying those leads and reporting back what happened.
So there's some bigger issues going on. You mentioned, I mentioned I've been at this a long time, and that was the problem. I wrote it back in a book that I wrote,
I've read it.
8 years ago.
Yes.
That was, and how I came about that book, just real quick. I ran into that problem so much. Finally, I said, I'm writing a book on, and I'm documenting it. So when I talk to a customer and say, just read this.
Yeah.
And now here we are X years later, and you're saying that's the problem.
It is.
But Why though? Why is it still what's the hurdle?
Well, there's been new technologies that have been added to help, a manager, sales manager, VP of sales, whomever, really promote their team to do the right thing, qualify the lead, utilize CRM as a technology source, utilize things like LinkedIn Navigator and all these different tools that will, in theory, help develop a better pipeline and get them more sales. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to that it has to be executed daily. And so a VP might sit back and say, this is what my team's going to do. I've outlined their responsibilities. I've outlined our expectations of them. It's mandatory. But if tomorrow and the next day and the next day, they are not actually holding their team accountable, they lose sight of it. And, those folks are busy.
But you're the VP. Mm-hmm. I'm being hypothetical.
Okay.
You're the VP. You've set the strategy, right? You're spending dollars on all of these lead sources that are out there, right? You got the pay-per-click, you got digital, you got email marketing, you got the SEO stuff, you got cold, all of them. You meet with your team. You say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Why would you not hold them accountable? Why is that getting dropped?
Well, a lot of times it's because there's really no baseline and there's no benchmark. So they say, hey, we've got leads from SEO, from SEM. We have leads coming in from a cold calling service. We have leads that are coming in that are, let's say, a piece of equipment that's off of lease. That's the lowest hanging fruit you can imagine. But when push comes to shove and their salespeople don't have the time to qualify them, there's no baseline, there's no benchmark. And so they'll get...
Why wouldn't they have the time?
Well, the salespeople?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they're focused on their current customers. They're focused on their hot prospects that they've been named.
That's an issue, right?
It is.
You're a sales guy and you have a territory, you have accounts, and now you want me to prospect.
Yeah. Well, most organizations, when I go out and do rep workshops, I always start the rep workshop off with, how much prospecting are you guys doing? How much are you responsible for? And the room's always silent. I always have to ask it again. I kind of have to poke fun that no one's participating.
Do you know going in that that's the answer before you ask it?
I know the answer is going to be something like 95.5. I prospect an hour a week. I try to make a couple extra stops a day. And at that
that's
point,
probably stretching it.
It is. And, as people kind of warm up to me and my, counterparts as we go and visit and hold these rep workshops, then, they'll start to be a little bit more forthcoming with the actual amount of prospecting that they're doing. But as a sales manager, can you blame them that you don't, want their time to be spent knocking on doors where they don't really have an understanding as to whether or not they are even a fit for them from a business perspective? Or would you have them focused on people that they know in their territory, that they've built that relationship with? And it's really about...
that's where they're making their commission.
It's where they're making their commission, but it's also really about, investment from an organizational level. Most companies that we work with and most companies that I've met that we're prospecting, they don't have the robust sales team that they need. They don't have the budget for it. They don't have the people. They're having trouble recruiting for that role. They're having trouble holding on to people in many cases. And so when push comes to shove, of course you want them to get that business that they're expecting to get, that you've already placed in the funnel. But it's really about the organization kind of taking a step back and investing in their future, investing on their pipeline and in the way that their accounts are serviced. And so we help a lot with account stratification and looking at, okay, if there are 1,000 accounts in your territory, how many is the salesperson actually responsible for? Because if it's 1,000, you're in trouble. If it's 100, maybe that's doable. Who else is touching those accounts? Is it inside sales? Is it marketing? And
are these questions you're asking as you're going out?
That's
the depth of the conversations?
It's definitely part of our sales process, and it's definitely part of kickoff process as well.
Yeah, on the prospect side, when you're out talking to prospects and you start hearing some of these, because it sounds like it's a trend.
Yes.
You're hearing the same things. When you hear things like, well, we don't have the budget, or you're hearing something and you're going, that isn't going to work, right? Where do you go with that?
Well, I typically, try to dig into why what they're doing now is working for them. And I don't want to say that it's reverse psychology, but it helps kind of point out some of the gaps inside of their business. So when they say they don't really have the budget, well, I say based on what? That you just don't have the budget to add someone today, or that you don't have a good understanding of the potential sales that you could get from actually putting disciplined prospecting, into this territory or into this industry. And so until they have an understanding as to what's out there, and, we can put together some, return on investment type of numbers and calculations.
But why do you think that's interesting, but why do you think these are VPs, these are higher, why are they not coming to these conclusions?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I'm going to answer for you a little bit, and I'll let you answer. I think we live in that space. So what is kind of every day for us, it's not every day for people who don't live in that space.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I find too that VP, sales manager, doesn't really matter the title or even the layer. Most of the time, those folks are getting involved in major sales and their time is sucked there. So a lot of organizations, you see sales managers that have no sales managerial training. They've never managed anyone before, but they're really great in sales. They're really great in front of the customer. And so they just keep getting promoted. And to a certain extent, that's wonderful for the organization to be able to keep that skill set and bring in the big dog when you need the big dog to close a sale. But at the same time, their time is now focused on prospects, which is somewhat redundant. And there's several layers of people that are focused on actually closing a deal and the sales process itself, versus things like making sure that their team has the right resources, making sure they have the right team in place, making sure that their vendors are being held accountable to this spend. So are you saying that
you're seeing sales managers that, or even VP of sales, that they're still actively involved in selling?
Every day.
So they're really just like their sales guys. Sales guys don't have time to prospect because they're managing accounts.
Exactly.
VP of sales doesn't have time to manage because they're closing big dogs.
Absolutely.
Is that kind of a major foundation of a problem?
I would say it is. And
how would you define that problem? Like if you had to categorize it or define it, how would you define that problem?
Well, I really think it's about role and responsibility breakdown. And so, a lot of the organizations that we work with or are trying to work with don't have a good understanding of the individual responsibilities of each role. Then there's all that overlap that we talked about. And then there's people that are, just wanting to help. And, most organizations, you see somebody that has, passion and drive. And so they get pulled into other areas of the business because of that impact that they make. But then their impact's diluted because now instead of focusing on their main goal of maybe streamlining their sales team and getting to X number as a group, now they're fighting to get to X number, or they're jumping over on the operational side to handle a mess that was created or something of that nature. Yeah. So, when you have that really strong, impactful person, you find that they are typically stretched very thin, not even inside of their current responsibilities, but inside of other departments inside of the business.
How often when you're talking to prospects, and they're talking about either engaging you or some company like you or some other lead source, whatever it may be, how often do you think, or how often do you actually run into where you believe they're really looking for a life preserver? They're looking for a quick fix.
Yeah, I'd say that is actually changing. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I would say that a lot of companies were looking for a shot in the arm. And that's not what we do at Concept. We can generate, leads or qualify leads quickly off the start, but really what we're focused on is developing a pipeline. And
what's changing? Why do you think it's changing? Why is the market changing?
Because the same topic that I talked about earlier about that they used to be looking for leads, more leads, more leads. My team needs more leads. Well, now it's I need better leads, or I need leads to be qualified and managed. And so as that changes, as they realize that they've spent, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars on leads that never turned into anything, they said, I don't want to spend any more money on leads until I can actually prove that return.
So do you think the market, I want to paraphrase what you just said, do you think the market has transitioned from lead generation to more lead management?
I'd say, yeah, especially in the industries that we play in.
So you think companies are getting
capital equipment.
Stronger, smarter at generating leads through the various sources that you talked about?
Yeah, I think it's driven, by a past experience and being burned, as I said, by spending, tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands of dollars on leads that never turn into anything. But I also think it's driven on how, buyers are shopping. And so, buyers are looking for e-commerce solutions. Buyers are looking to be informed by the website, by internet, by trade publications, by thought leadership. They're not necessarily looking for a salesperson to start them from square one and explain, why their solution is going to really drastically affect their business.
Consumers more educated today.
Absolutely. And so they're spending more time online. I mean, we all are. People are glued to their phones, to their emails, to, the websites where they're getting news and education about their business. But,
Are you an Amazon shopper?
Oh, I'm a huge Amazon shopper.
Yeah. I don't go to the stores anymore.
I try my best to do everything on Amazon, and I'm the one too that I click Prime, and if it's not on Prime, I don't think I'm going to buy it.
I order things at 3:00 in the afternoon, and they're at my doorstep the next day.
Yeah.
I couldn't get to the store any faster.
Yeah. So Amazon effect is huge. I mean, it's making us want to buy everything online, and it's making shipping and transportation,
it's changing
and
industry.
material handling. It's changing that industry drastically, and a lot of our customers have gotten well in front of that by broadening their service and product offering, but they also are thinking differently as to how they're marketing. Things like word of mouth and knocking on doors will not sustain their business. Digitally marketing through their website, through social media, through ads, through organic searches, through becoming partners with organizations that are, trade and thought leaders. They have to do that. And so leads now are being generated more digitally. So if you're a company that's, doesn't have any focus on, purchasing through the internet or educating your customers through the internet, I challenge you to take a look at that.
And there's a lot still out there.
There are.
There's a lot,
especially in industries like construction, material handling.
It's blue collar,
yeah,
old
they're
industry.
saying, no, my guys out in the field, my customers out in the field, they're not on social media. Well, the fact is they are. And if you go on social media and you're looking at hashtags of people working with specific brands of construction equipment or on site showing off what they're doing because it promotes their business as well, you will, probably start to see your thought process change a little bit about what customers are online. And if they're not online in the masses like a B2C space today, the fact is that's where it's going.
So how does a company get over that hurdle of, hey, I got leads coming in, I'm not where do they start? How do they get over that?
Yeah.
How do they get through it?
Yeah, well, I guess taking a step back is really important. So looking at, what lead sources they have and taking inventorying and almost an audit of what they're currently doing is really important. I'm ensure that, a lot of companies are not just going after every shiny object out there, right? So things like being able to track someone, IP address, and then you're going to do all this research to figure out what that company is and who they are and who's searching you. Well, people don't have time to qualify leads that are ready and placed in their hands. They're not going to have time to do all that work. So they really need to go through and take an audit of what they're currently doing from a lead generation perspective and from a lead quality perspective, qualification perspective.
What should they be looking for in that audit, though?
Well, they should be looking for the volume of leads that are coming through, the perceived quality, and then what's the process of leads coming through. So is there a system that is a universal source for all leads that you can track?
Well, you mentioned earlier about budget always comes up, right? How many dollars are being spent foolishly because they're not tracking it?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you, but I could tell you that.
Hypothetically, they probably could find budget
Sure.
by better managing and saying, hey, I'm spending $20,000 over here and I'm just not getting anything. I could take that 20 and put over here and could change my sales year around.
Well, that's the perceived idea, but I would challenge them to say, okay, if you take that 20 grand away from lead generation and you put it to your salesperson, what are the metrics and what are the requirements and qualifications of that salesperson that's actually going to provide you that return on investment?
I think the whole role of the salesperson it's just changed.
Yeah.
You got to, back years ago, the sales guy did everything, right? Just did everything. Knocked on the door, found the customer, did all the prospecting, all the presentation, all the closing, all the customer service. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. And if it does, it's probably outdated, and that's probably one of your major problems.
Absolutely.
And so the role has changed, and I think companies have to adopt that.
Yeah.
They got to understand, what do I want out of that sales guy? And that's all I need out of him or her, right? And the other stuff, I got to find, you mentioned earlier, which I thought was a very good point. You mentioned earlier about roles and responsibilities.
Yeah. You really have to assign specific roles or specific responsibilities to each role and ensure that you are managing every day to not silo those, because, obviously collaboration and communication is so important, but to just make sure that people are truly focused on that and their time is not being spent elsewhere. So I think the salesperson role has changed significantly.
Are you having a lot of that type of conversation?
Yes, we are. And
how's it received?
Well, we typically don't have that conversation off the start, because a lot of our customers are looking for us to come in and come in and provide strategy to this one little piece of their customer life cycle, and that's prospecting or marketing.
So you're going in and you think they have a lot of this going on.
Absolutely. And in our kickoff meetings and our initial meetings, what we're trying to do is trying to prep them pump and kind of open and broaden the horizon as to how that role and that function, when disciplined and effective, can affect other areas of the business. So, how is lead qualification affecting lead generation? How is lead qualification affecting sales? How is CRM affecting sales process, et cetera?
Is that daunting for the customer? 'Cause
absolutely.
They're looking at something this big, and you're going in and saying, you can't, it's part of this.
Yes.
And how overwhelming is that for them?
It's super overwhelming. I hear all the time, well, we're working on that. We're in discussions as to simplifying this process or creating this new role or restructuring. And every organization is faced with that.
I'm going to ask you, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Okay.
How do you personally respond to that type of thing when you know they're not working on it? And if they are, they're going down the wrong track.
Sure.
Right? And they're going to waste money. Although they want to spend some dollars with you, it's not going to work. How do you handle that?
I typically refer to stories. I'll give them examples of customers that I've worked with that have also said that they're working on it, or also said that they have it all under control.
You've heard it once or twice? You've seen it?
I would be a really rich person if every time I got even a nickel from hearing, we've got this. Don't worry about my sales team. We've got our process established. I hold my people accountable. I mean, every response is a bit of a barrier, or it's kind of like a back off, you don't know my business too well. But if they're bringing us in as a consultant, they typically have more of an open mind. If they're bringing us in as an execution partner, they typically have more of a closed thought as to what we can do. But we open that as we start to tell them about our experiences, and we start to poke holes. And the holes aren't, I'm not poking and being argumentative, but I'm also saying to them, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, I understand that you're working on this area, but it's not your top priority. Here's why it should be, or let me give you 3 recommendations based on the 100+ customers that I work with now that would expedite you getting to the
I was going to ask you that. I'm glad you mentioned it. You said 100+ customers. You mentioned that you traveled almost every week, right? And you're seeing multiple customers. So just to kind of put some context around some of the things you're saying, this information you're sharing, this knowledge, this foundation of context that you're using, it's coming from being in front of hundreds of customers a year.
Absolutely,
And
it
of
is.
various sizes, various marketing strategies, and I mean all. So I mean,
Yeah.
you have some reference points.
I have a lot of reference points, and without those reference points, I don't think that I'd be able to do my job as well as I hope I'm doing.
You'd be like a lot of the people you're talking to.
Sure, and I also think that our customers and prospects I meet would not feel the credibility that they do feel after learning about the experience that I've gone through and that other members of this company have gone through in terms of just visibility. Mm-hmm. Being a part of a company that's trying to evolve, that's trying to implement a new software, that's trying to change culture. That's what it really comes down to is a cultural change. Because a lot of what I'm talking about, and we talked about it earlier, and salesperson execution comes down to a manager's execution, comes down to what that VP or president is thinking as to setting the tone for that company. And so people think, hey, we're going to go out there and we're going to call and generate some leads for you. But really what we're trying to do is dig deeper so that we can really promote needle movement through cultural change.
I think that's probably the key. I think it comes down to personnel. And that personnel, it starts at the top. And I wrote about this years ago, and I'm hearing you. And I don't want to say it's refreshing. That would be an oxymoron, if that's the right word. But it's interesting that you're sharing some of the same things. And I wrote about it, that if you have this problem, you're the problem.
Yeah.
You're sitting at the top. Now, sitting at the top doesn't mean you have to be the expert. You just have to know how to solicit the expertise. You have to drive it.
And a lot of managers need to get out of their own way. Yeah. And a lot of people up on the top need to get out of their own way, because the strategy and or the intent is positive. It makes sense. It's logical. But then there's also, a lot of bottlenecks that occur because they think, you know what, I'm saying I want my team to execute in this way, and I'm going to manage to it. And so they get down a lot deeper than they should. And they're getting involved in the weeds, individual sales, individual conversations between the person that reports to them and then another rung below, when really they just need to let go of it. So it's about
that's hard for some people.
It is, and they have to, they have to trust in their team that reports to them. And most VPs obviously have sales managers,
again,
but
right?
it's all personnel. Yeah, absolutely.
Got to have the right people in the right spots.
Yeah, and a lot of bottlenecks are created too when someone has the right intention but is in their own way. So things like, well, send me that first, and I'll review it and I'll assign it to the right person. Or I want to approve this quote or that quote, or I need to be involved in this step of the process. And again, positive intention. They probably have a lot of visibility. That is wonderful. But at the end of the day, they're creating these extra steps in these processes. And so when I talk about sales process with our customers, I'm using this phrase a lot of what is the, or what process can inspire the least amount of people to work on it and just get the job done right. Because you can have visibility to it, so that means you can manage to it. But if you're part of that process and that becomes a daily task, it just gets out of hand, and you find there's a lot of money wasted in bottlenecks as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as if you had to kind of sum some of that up in your visitations, in your exposure, your insight, your conversations, the number one thing you run into is,
I'd say sales process adoption.
Sales process adoption. Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes with lead management and all of that, right? I can't manage these leads that are coming in if I don't have processes.
It's tied to every part of the funnel. In the lead generation or lead qualification portion of the funnel, and that top of funnel activity and mid funnel activity.
But most of these customers, they have CRM.
Yeah. They do.
They have CRM, but they don't have the processes.
They don't have the processes built, or they're not managing to the processes. And so, a salesperson and holding sales accountability is tied to every single piece. And a lot of times when we're partnered with someone and we're qualifying leads that, they've set the level of qualification. We don't go out as concept and say, this is a good qualified lead, we think you should go on it. They say, if it meets this criteria, send it to us. And so we send those good qualified leads over, and now there's a microscope on how that salesperson's going to handle them because of the money that they're spending. And so when you're looking at lead qualification from, like concept size, we can really show them that what you're seeing with our leads is just the tip of the iceberg. What about everything else that they're responsible for qualifying? What about that email you sent them last week with the hot tip lead that you got? Have you followed up on it? Do you know that they called it? There's nothing logged in CRM. And so that problem is totally systemic.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
You've seen the quote that we've had in our office before, and it was established years ago, and it was up on the wall, and it says, it's not about closing the deal today, it's about building the pipeline for tomorrow. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what you're saying. I got to get this pipeline moving, right? And to get a pipeline moving, I got to have processes. I got to have systems. I got to have people. I have to have strategy. But my understanding and my belief is once the pipeline is working, and there's a lot that goes into creating a pipeline, but once it's working, sales should fall.
They should.
They should fall.
They should.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think companies don't spend that time up front of really creating the foundation of what they need, the strategies that you said, the personnel, the systems, the technology, the processes. And so they're always chasing their tail from year to year.
They are. And, they're afraid to invest when it fails. And it might fail because of personnel, or it might fail because of the quality of a vendor or partner. It might fail because they stopped managing it.
Yeah.
They started, it was working well, and they stopped and they failed. And really, at the end of the day, each company doesn't have to say, okay, I'm going to invest 5 times more in my lead generation, my sales team, my CRM, all at once. I would actually recommend the opposite of that. I would strip back and take a look and take that inventory before starting to make change inside of those areas of the business.
Where would you point? There's people listening right now, right? There's probably directors out there. There's VPs out there. There's owners out there. And they have issues, right? We all do, right? Concept's not perfect either, right? We all have them. It's a constant strive every day to improve. Where would you direct somebody? I mean, generically, without knowing it.
Yeah. Well, after doing an audit, I would ask them to come up with the best case scenario of what that customer experience is. So if you were to market to a customer, what does that experience feel like? What are you communicating to them? If you were to be on the phone with a customer, what do you want to learn about them? What is the experience that you want them to have? And when they're handed over to sales, again, what are the steps that your team is taking to ultimately provide service or product to a customer? And so, better understanding their customer experience should shape all of the processes that are being designed really behind the scenes. So doing something the way that your operation teams needs it to be done is much different than looking at what is the best experience I can provide to my customer and how am I going to do that through operational process. So instead of, taking this audit and then designing everything from the inside out, I would challenge them to design it from the outside in. What are their customers telling them? Why are their good customers staying with them, growing with them, expanding with them? Why are people leaving? And why are prospects engaging or not engaging? And you can break it up into department, right? It doesn't need to all follow on a president or a VP marketing. You're responsible for understanding what customers are attracted to about what we're currently doing and what detractors are out there that we can minimize. Sales, you're responsible for understanding what it takes to actually provide customer with education and quote and service to ultimately keep their business and grow their business. Customer service, what is it that you need to do on the back end to gauge their quality or their satisfaction and the quality of you as their vendor?
Here's the challenge with that. I agree with you. Here's the challenge, though. The challenge is That's not a start Monday and Wednesday at noon.
I know.
You're done. It's not that.
It's not.
Right?
It's ongoing, and it should be ongoing.
Yep. Now, you mentioned earlier that one of the problems is the head of sales, the director, the VP, whatever it may be, depending on size company. Mm-hmm. He or she doesn't have the time.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that maybe that's what their role needs to be?
I am.
Or at least part of that
I
day?
think, yeah, part of it. And also, just taking inventory on the personnel that you have and really ensuring that you have the right leadership in place. So, every organization knows there are some people in your company that execute well, and there are some people in your company that strategize well, and then, either or in that case scenario, there are leaders.
It's roles and responsibilities.
Yeah. And so, of course you can't start on day one and say, we're going to revamp our whole company and we're going to do it in a year. It should be ongoing, but you need to make sure that you have the right leadership in each function of the company that's always challenging what you're currently doing, trying to improve, that's trying to simplify and streamline processes. And, it's really not, you can't eat an elephant in the day that you say it's the same thing that inside of, sales and prospecting and
I think it's
customer experience.
I think you're right. I think it's, companies are constantly going around the hull of the boat plugging things. Mm-hmm. And that's just the norm. When if they took the time to say, hey, I think I need to revamp the hull of this boat. I need different wood. I need different fiberglass.
Exactly.
I need to do that. Mm-hmm. Because if not, you're just always going to go around, and next year you're going to be doing the same thing, and you're not going to save any more money. Mm-hmm. You're not.
The same, you can relate it to having a cold. You think you have a cold, and you keep taking over-the-counter cold medication. You're taking Coldies, you're taking Zyrtec.
Although I will say NyQuil. NyQuil is good. I have good success with NyQuil.
I'm not a NyQuil fan. I sleep very heavily without any NyQuil, so I don't think that would be good for me. But
I'm going to get NyQuil to sponsor the show since I said
Oh, okay, yes, great.
Yeah. The NyQuil is good. Okay,
well, let me know if you get any free samples. Maybe I'll give it a shot. But, you think that you have a cold. And nothing that you're doing is actually making you feel better. You might feel better for a few days or a few hours while you're on that medication. But when the medication wears off, you start feeling bad again. And then fast forward 3 weeks or a month, if you're me and you're stubborn and you don't want to go see the doctor, then you go to the doctor and you find out that you actually have a sinus infection. And everything that you've been taking and all of the money that you've wasted and all the time you've been feeling sick, you actually had a sinus infection. So would it have been more efficient and more effective if you just went to the doctor?
But you didn't want to take the time. You didn't want to miss work.
Exactly.
Right. That's a good analogy.
So that's the same thing that a lot of the sales organizations are facing. And so, some of those medicines that they're, self-prescribing with or self-diagnosed with.
It's just a putty they're putting in the hole of the boat.
It's lead sources that they don't understand the quality of. It's shiny new technology. It's a salesperson that's just giving them, crap all day and is fluffing up their pipeline and telling them these things are going to close, but they need to dig deeper. And speaking of shiny object too, that's actually a good transition to talk about CRM. So a lot of companies implement a CRM because they think it's just going to fix everything. It's like this magic tool.
I just need it.
It's one of those things I need to take. And unless you've taken the time to actually diagnose, self-diagnose, or even work with a partner or consultant to diagnose, then this tool's not going to do anything for them. So,
it's an expense.
It's an expense, and now it's more money that you can't show a return on. You're frustrating your team. Your team is disjointed.
They're not seeing any value.
There's more visibility to the team being disjointed than there ever was. So, CRM is an amazing tool, but if you have not established process and if you have not established clear responsibilities for roles, I wouldn't even suggest spending money on it. No. I wouldn't.
It almost gets down to there's some fundamentals. And if you're the head of sales, you're the head of the company, you got to take the time to define the fundamentals and make sure that inside my company, these fundamentals are the best that I can possibly have them.
Yes.
They're never going to be perfect. Ours aren't perfect. It's a work in process every day. And why would it not? Right? Look how sales has changed over the last 3, 4, 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
It's going to continue. Technology is going to change. All of that's going to change. It's a work in process. But I think companies have to begin to adopt that has to become a fundamental thing they do. They just can't go through motions. That's costly. It's very costly going through motions.
Yeah. And a lot of companies, if the VP of sales or marketing or operations doesn't have the time to actually go and dig deep and promote change, they'll bring in a consultant to do that, or they'll bring in someone that's really just focused on process. Yeah. Even internally, that's just like, this is a projects person. They're going to work with marketing on this part of what they do, and they might work with sales on this part and operations on that part. But they almost act as the glue between those different groups. So a vendor partner can do that, internal person can do that, but someone has to have that responsibility.
Yeah.
Because if it's everyone's responsibility, then you know it too well, and so do I, is sometimes when you get in a room with a bunch of people that think that they know best or think that their process is the best process out there, it's the simplest, it's the most effective. There's differences in personality, and a lot of times people can't even back it up. Yeah. They just think it's their way. And so because I do it well, that means everyone else can do it well. And I challenge our team to think about that all the time. You're training someone, you're coaching someone how you would be coached, how you would want to be coached, how you would, learn. They might have a completely different way. They might be.
And as a manager, you gotta figure that out.
Yeah.
Managing's really about, it's not, you can be an effective manager and really not be the jack of all trades on your particular product or service.
Absolutely.
If you can manage people, people move the needle.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, just talking about, okay, so if not everyone learns the same, not everyone does everything the same way, a universal process is really important. A universal cultural code of conduct is really important, because if you're focused on your customer and then every part of the organization has built their process based on that customer experience, you will do more business. You will. But it's a huge challenge, and it's a huge, bite to chew. I mean, it takes time. And as you said, it never goes away, and it shouldn't go away. And a lot of times I break it to our customers that are working with us, and they might be frustrated because their CRM adoption is low, or they might be frustrated because they've asked the same sales rep 19 times to update them on leads, and they're not doing that. And I'll say, you know what? I feel for you, because we do that every day. I feel for you. But I also have to tell you that this pain's really never going to go away. We can make it easier. You can definitely simplify it. You can inspire a different level of accountability, but it's only through consistency. So I'm sorry, Mr. Sales Manager, there will always be someone on your team that you're going to have to hound.
It's a work in process.
I can help you through CRM to have visibility to everything they're doing. I can help you through CRM reporting to call them out so that you don't have to dig into your team to find out what's going on. But there's always that accountability and that consistency that's required. Otherwise, they're just going to be constantly juggling.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Well, I think you mentioned a lot of good things, and I think it pays to solicit somebody who has the skill set you're looking for. You'd mentioned outsourcing consultants, and as a manager, you can't encompass everything that you need.
Yeah.
Right? There's not people out there that just have all those talents, all those skill sets, right?
Yeah.
And I think as a manager, you have to accept the fact that, hey, I don't have that. I have to solicit for that.
Yes.
The manager, that's his or her responsibility. That's not their responsibility to do it. It's responsibility to harness it, to envelope it,
Yeah.
to catapult it,
Yes.
to orchestrate the team. And I think if you can come to grips with that, you go out and you bring the right team together. Some of that might be internal. Some of it might be I have to solicit people on the outside. Mm-hmm. And the upfront costs, it's almost like, I don't want to say you have to disregard it, but you have to factor it into the big picture.
You do.
If I'm bringing somebody in that can help me get to A to Z in 3 weeks versus me trying to do it and it's going to take me 2 years, mm-hmm. which is really more cost effective?
Absolutely.
So I just think that's a lot of things people got to go through. And I think those answers will come from what you probably suggested. Do an audit. Mm-hmm. Find out where your issues are so you know where to go to solicit or to build the right expertise to go after your problems.
And the goal is always to simplify. Looking at the outlier or this maybe would happen in the customer experience, but also in a salesperson's role, that's not going to allow for process building to be any easier than, it's really difficult to say, well, what about this one customer that we have? We do it this way with them and it really works. Well, do you want to do that for your entire customer base? Maybe not. Maybe they're your largest customer that you have figured out a way to service. They really like it. You give them a lot of time. Maybe your margin on that customer isn't as great as you'd like it to be because of the amount of time and energy and horsepower that you're sinking in from your team's perspective, but you got to do it to keep them. If you treat every single customer like that, is that beneficial for your business or not? And so, I'm always challenging folks when we're going through and learning about their sales model and sales process when they say something like, well, send me that lead first, and then I'll send it to my team. I'll say, with all due respect, I understand that you want to really keep tabs on what's going on. My team can help you do that. So you can be copied on everything. We'll send you reporting on it. We can do spot checking, whatever it is, but you cannot bottleneck this. We need to get it over to your salesperson. And then we need your support is holding them accountable.
Either get on it or your competition is.
Yeah. A vendor or partner being a hammer and being a nag to a salesperson is not a good deal for the vendor partner, of course. Obviously, nobody wants to be that, but it's not a good deal for you as the person that's investing in that either, because you are losing credibility if you're allowing for someone outside of the organization to do that. If you're the person that's really driving that culture, then you need to do it.
What drives you? What drives Lauren?
Oh, man. I'm a worker. I've been raised as a hard worker. I've worked since I was 13. And before that, I'm sure I did a lot of other things that probably weren't considered work from an outside perspective, but that's just really what I was raised to do. My family, for the most part, is in sales. And so being in front of people and having, good quality conversations and being really, an advocate for your customer is something that drives me. So I really try to put myself in their shoes before I pass judgment, before I tell them what I think. And I think it earns me goodwill with our customers that I'm really looking out for their best interest, because I am. Yeah. Not only am I looking out for them because I personally care, I'm looking out for them because if I'm not, then whatever service or product that I'm supplying them with, regardless of whether I work at Concept or not, will not stick around. I won't be able to retain it. Yeah. And the last thing I want to do is burn a bridge or waste someone's money. I mean, there have been lots of times where people have said, I want to get more leads and I'm going to double down. And I'll say, well, you know what? I don't really want to do that until we can pay for the leads. Yeah. And then they kind of look at me like, you're turning away business? Well, I am, because what happens if I double down with you and then you say, well, we wasted $100,000 on your services versus 50, and now we're not going to work with you again, or now we're going to try something else. I would rather start from the ground up. So anyways, what drives me is working with customers, learning about their experience.
Do you like the customer interaction?
I do. Yeah, it's my favorite part of my role and really why I moved into the position that I have at Concept.
Do you like the variety?
Yes. Yeah, I think It's very interesting to meet people of all walks of life. It's also very interesting to work with so many departments at our customers and our partners. So working with a VP of a large logistics organization and working with a maintenance manager or a service manager are two completely different ball games, and both roles are so important. It's not about that a VP is any more important than the person that's running the service operations for something like a forklift dealer, because if either of those roles fails, there's a huge problem. Yep. So, I think it's really interesting to kind of see what their challenges are and almost, try to relate that back.
Are you a problem solver?
I am, yeah. That gets me in trouble though sometimes too.
Do you look for problems?
Oh, I don't look for problems because they're so plentiful. But
you don't shy away from when you see them.
I don't shy away from them, and like I said, sometimes that gets me into trouble personally, where someone like a family or friend might just be venting to me about something, and I'll say, "Well, I'm learning now." Now I'll say, "Well, do you want my opinion, or are you just venting?"
Do you have a hard time saying no?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I'm getting better with that though. Yeah. But yeah, I'll find myself giving advice or giving perspective or telling a story where it might not be welcomed with my friends and family. So, being a problem solver gets me into trouble there. But at work, being a problem solver also gets me into trouble because the same problem that I'm sharing, that, a VP or a director is getting pulled in a lot of different directions, and not always because other people are pulling them, but because they think they can make an impact. That's definitely happened with me, and it's something that I'm working against every day. Yeah. So I totally want to work with our director of production because of the experiences that I've had with production and how I think I could make an impact. But the fact is, it's not my job. And so I need to stay in my lane, not because I can't make an impact or not because we're not collaborative, but because that is not my core function.
There's other people to do that function now.
Exactly. And letting go of that is difficult.
You shared that's kind of the advice you got to give to other people too.
I know. Oh yeah. So I'm trying to practice what I preach, but I'm, being honest, it's a challenge every day to stay focused in your lane.
Well, I know you are extremely busy. Mm-hmm. I hear you walk down the halls, and I can always tell it's your walk. You have a very really distinct walk, so I can always tell Lauren's on the move.
Yes.
And you get solicited a lot now for speaking engagements and sales meetings, and
I'm starting to. Yeah. I definitely have been solicited a lot from our partners and our customers to go out and meet with their sales team, both at the managerial perspective, but also at like a coaching type of role. Mm-hmm. But recently I've been doing some, larger speaking engagements. I got another podcast booked for Friday, and I'm headed out for the Mahita convention.
You don't have your own secretary now, do you?
No, I wish. Let's talk with Jeff about getting me the budget for that. No, I'm excited because, first of all, it's a really great opportunity for me. I feel really thankful that people are interested in hearing what I have to say based on my experience. But I'm also learning a whole lot about what it is to speak to a broad audience all at once. So I can turn myself into speaking with a VP and speaking with a lower level manager or a mid-level manager pretty quickly if I'm having a one-on-one conversation or in a small room. But, learning what's impactful and what's exciting to the mass is something that I've really never been challenged with. So that and also relying on sources outside of concept and outside of my experience to become more well-rounded and to reference things like industry benchmarks and know what's happening inside of the world of transportation or know what's happening inside of the world of material handling. Yeah. That has helped, the requests that I've had to speak, that's really driven a lot of my self-education. And so I really am excited about that because I'm learning more, and, each little nugget that I can add to my repertoire is really...
You grow.
Yeah, it's helpful.
You grow. It's a work in process.
Yeah, I enjoy it. And of course, I get jitters just like anybody else, speaking in front of a large group. But I'm learning that people want to see somebody relatable.
I've always noticed when I speak, I get lots of jitters until I get going.
Yeah.
And then once I get going, it's like I could go for all day.
Yeah.
But getting going, it's like, man, it's tough getting in front of a group.
It is, and just reps too. Just getting in reps.
Well, when you're in front of groups, and then you look out, and you got some people going. Mm-hmm. Some their eyes are closed. Some are on their phone, and some are engaged. And it's like,
yeah. Well, you're not going to win everybody. I can't remember who came up with this rule, but I learned this rule several years ago that if you look at a group of 100, there's going to be 20 people that really are either excited about what you're into or what you're, talking about, or that are sleeping or completely disinterested, or for whatever reason, don't believe you, don't like you, dislike, whatever. So there's about 80 people, though, that you have the opportunity to swing either way. So you've got the 10s on either side. I love you. I hate you. I'm interested. I'll go down any dark tunnel with you, or I don't even want to be in the same room as this person. But there's 80 people in between there that you can help swing to either side. And so it's really about, trying to look at them and say what's impactful to the mass versus these outliers. I'm also learning too that no one wants to sit and watch someone who is so buttoned up that it's robotic. Being polished, being prepared, being confident, they're all very important things. But if you're getting up there and reading something that you wrote and it's not your own words and you think that it sounds more professional, there's just like a lack of relation there. So I'm just trying to be myself, and I'm trying to be, if a joke fails that I share, which many do, trust me, if a joke fails, then you know what? I should be self-deprecating and say, hey, that didn't land as well as I thought.
Move on.
And maybe I'll get a couple people there. And then the next time that I position something, they'll say, hey, that person's actually a person. They're affected. Real. They're in this conversation. This is an organic topic that they're speaking to, not something that they wrote on, 5 paragraphs
Well, I think
down.
It's obvious that you have a lot of knowledge. You have a lot of exposure. You got a lot of data points, a lot of reference points. You've been exposed to a lot of large companies, small companies, all different size, sales organizations, CRM processes, lack of processes, personnel, manager types. I mean, you've been exposed to all of that.
Yeah.
And so you're a good resource. If somebody wanted to reach out to you,
sure,
how would they reach out to you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and I am becoming a heavier LinkedIn user every single day because I really like the collaborative and community aspect that it has. You can contact me by email, and that's lzak@conceptltd.com. Or you can reach out to me directly by phone, and that's 330-590-8515.
You would invite anybody to give you a call.
Absolutely.
Talk about the things that we talked about.
Sure thing. I think we can talk about anything. But I think a lot of our prospects and our customers are under the impression that to reach out and to talk with someone requires a huge investment. And the fact of the matter is that sometimes just as a partner or as a prospect, we can learn from each other just through conversations even before a contract signed. Yeah. And so, I'm constantly reaching out to members of organizations that we belong to, industry organizations, to say, can I even help guide you at all? Can I just learn more about you to help my personal development and my understanding of your business? Because, the things that I've shared today, they're not rocket science, right? But they're also not glaringly,
obvious for everybody.
Obvious on a daily basis. And so what I'm talking about right now, that doesn't take, time and money. It takes time, of course, but it's not saying that we've got to sign a $120,000 contract with you for me to give you a piece of advice as to how to look at your team prior to even looking at doing business with a company like Concept. So, I absolutely encourage everybody to reach out.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I appreciate you coming and taking the time.
Thank you so
I
much
know
for
your
having me.
schedule is very busy, so thanks for coming into the studio. Hey, thanks for listening in today. We covered a lot of topics. Lauren was very specific on some of the struggles, reasons for the struggles. If you're finding yourself in that situation, you want to reach out to Lauren. She's opened her door. She would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in today. Stay tuned. We got more shows like Lauren coming up.